What's going on, everybody? My name is Nick.
And my name is Dave.
And this is the Deep Dive, and we are in part 3 of our Wesley series called Rooted, where we're just learning everything there is about Wesley and what he taught, and kind of, it almost feels like adult confirmation a little bit.
Yeah, we talked about that, yeah. Not everything, because there's much to know, but we're trying to hit the important parts anyway, and kind of remind ourselves of our roots. And I've enjoyed preaching it, and I've got lots of good feedback. So we got some things to talk about.
Let's get into it, shall we?
Let's do it.
Well, Dave, it has been a very eventful weekend around these parts, but also sports-wise and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to start. You want to start at the pumpkin patch?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great weekend, a lot of very active weekend here in Hickory Flat, and the pumpkins, which we've been looking forward to, first time we've done it. I think the church did it years and years ago, but it's the first time they've had a pumpkin patch, and we've had a pumpkin patch in a while, and what a turnout Saturday morning when the pumpkins arrived. And
I mean, 9 o'clock, we were told to be here, and people were already there unloading pumpkins when I pulled in, like, right at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
And it was great. I mean, just, it really was a community kind of effort. You know, you had adults, you had kids, you had Boy Scouts, youth group. I mean, just everybody coming together.
So I love seeing the families there.
I know.
The young families, and particularly, I'm glad we had the, what is the tractor thing we've got?
The Gator.
The Gator. I'm glad we had the Gator, because we can move a lot of pumpkins with that. But when people come with their wheelbarrows, and sometimes there would be like a little family with little kids, and it was very cool to watch. And I was in the truck the whole time, and that was entertaining as well. So
it was fun kind of out watching people stack the pumpkins on the sides too, because some of these little kids were like, "Oh, that's a big pumpkin," and then they'd want to try to go pick it up, and they would, and then their parents were like, "Oh, don't drop it. That's the church's." You know what I mean? But it was kind of like, whatever. Let them feel like they're helping out a lot, and they did. Everybody. I mean, we unloaded probably about 1,000. Well, I think it was 750 big pumpkins.
Yeah, there were 750 big pumpkins. There's many more than that because of the baby pumpkins and all that stuff. I don't know what the total number of gourds we've got out there.
We knocked it out in like an hour and a half or something like that.
Yeah, we got finished at like 10:15 or 10:20. And it started before 9. But but what a great day, and what a great event, and it really is kind of a unifying thing as we're doing that. We got off to a start. Actually, on Saturday, we weren't open, but I accidentally ended up
selling a few pumpkins.
Pumpkins, because people were showing up. I mean, these babies, they sell themselves. I
was wondering about that. Like, if people were just going to be like, "Oh, look at that,"
one thing, we had soccer up here.
Yeah.
Several hundred people up here playing soccer, and they come with their families, and they were going pumpkins. And then we've got this great children's area.
Yeah.
Lauren and I think Nicole and others, suggested that. And what a great idea, because the kids wanted to get up there and play.
Yeah.
And so, so this pumpkin thing is going to be something's going to be ongoing for the rest of the month. But it was cool. Yeah.
So if you need some pumpkins, come grab them from our pumpkin patch.
For sure.
All the proceeds go to youth and children's ministry. So we're excited about that, and it's just going to be a cool undertaking, I think, for the whole church.
Yeah, and a beautiful weekend. Sports wise, the Braves got to show up tonight. The time off hurt them for sure, because it hurt the Dodgers too. But how about the Dogs?
Yeah,
looking good.
Looking good.
It was a great weekend for sure. So,
well, we won't get too far into it, because we could do the whole thing on the sports. I could talk for days about that, but we're here to kind of talk about this sermon. So, Dave, why don't you kind of give us a quick synopsis of what you talked about, and then we'll surely have a few points to dig in on.
Sure. Well, we have been talking for the last several weeks about the theology and wisdom of John Wesley. And in rolling out this sermon, we needed to spend a couple of weeks just sort of looking at the backstory. There was theology and wisdom in that, but we needed to get set up as to, who is John Wesley, where he came from, what's his story, and then how did the church get here to America. So we've been doing that for the first 2 weeks. And so this week we were able to dive a little bit deeper into the theology of John Wesley, and particularly that early Methodist movement.
Right.
What did they believe? And so I spent some time talking about the four alls of Methodism.
Yeah.
And I kind of looked at that in not actually contrast, because I don't want to get into debates over theology. In this week, as we get into the sermon this week, we're going to be looking at the Catholic spirit, the universal church spirit.
Sure.
Wesley's belief about, in essentials, unity, and non-essentials, liberty, and in all things, charity.
Right.
And so we need all sorts of different kinds of Christian movements, because we have different people who think different ways. But there is some specifics that are very different in, say, Calvinism and Wesleyanism or Arminianism, or whatever you want to call it. So the 5 points of Calvinism, and I don't know if I can get them all out, but I put those up.
The tulip.
Tulip, it's total depravity, and I can't remember them all.
Yeah.
So that's not important.
Look it up.
Because that's not what we're stressing here. And so they did have, I think, sort of in contrast to that, the four alls of Methodism.
Right.
And the first one was the one in where we really do differ from Calvinism, and that is that all can be saved.
Right.
Okay.
There's no pre-elect, no.
All can be saved. And, I talked a little about the quadrilateral, which is the Bible, scripture, tradition, reason, and experience, and how we use that to sort of arrive, or how Wesley used that to sort of arrive to where his theology was.
Yep.
And I made the case that I do think that everybody does that, whether you're a Calvinist or Pentecostal or whatever. Everybody is leaning on something besides, they're starting with the Bible.
Yeah.
But there's other things that inform it, our experiences and, our reason and tradition and all of that comes into play. And so, John Calvin, and this week we'll look at George Whitefield, kind of arrived at a different understanding of things than Wesley did.
Yep.
But he really was committed to this all can be saved. And, he looked at scripture to talk about that, the love of God was for all.
Yep.
And so that is a difference than the Calvinist understanding that there is a predetermined elect of people who will respond to him.
Right.
And so sometimes it just comes down to the nuances of how people talk about that. And a Calvinist might say, well, whoever is elect is going to respond to them. And so, Jesus' atoning work on the cross was for, those people and for, but Wesley stressed is for all people. All people can be saved.
Yeah.
And so the next all is all need to be saved. And this is where I think we would agree a lot with the Calvinist.
Sure.
And that, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God.
Yep.
The Calvinists call it total depravity. I think Wesley, I think I've got this right, he talked that he was within one hair's breadth of believing, the Calvinist part of this.
Okay.
Although I do think Wesley thought that there was and I think the word he uses is kind of a divine spark within everyone that can be ignited by the grace and love of God.
Right.
And so, you look at people, and there's not like these predestined people that are, they are going to always be depraved and evil and in sin, but that there is something within every human being that God created that can respond to the love of God. Now, it takes the human response,
right? But
it is there. And
I think in my Methodism, maybe because I've grown up Methodist so much, that's the way, I feel it makes the most sense to me. Even it's just not everybody is going to get that spark kindled and flamed, but that there's a chance for anybody to hear.
Yeah.
And I think for me even, it kind of took the right space and circumstances for me to hear God's call at the very beginning. And I don't think there was anything inherently bad about me or inherently good about me. I just feel like I caught the right, fire at the right time. You know what I mean? And it's just kind of burst into it from there. So I like it personally. I like to think that everybody has something inside them that's maybe divinely able to be sparked.
Yeah, and C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity, and we have a Sunday school class who's studying that right now. He kind of talks about this sort of universal thing that's in all peoples, wherever you go. I mean, people, tribes and places where they've never heard of Christ, but yet there is something about the order of the world in which is alike. Yeah. So, and I think when he uses examples, like I give you a piece of orange, and so you should then return and give a piece of orange to me. There's this kind of code that's there that was within people, and it's just sort of innately created by God, and and I think we can appeal to that with people, and Wesley would talk about prevenient grace. It is that grace that's going before that's kind of softening up hearts to come to Him. Yeah.
I think in confirmation, when I've done confirmation classes, when we get to the topic of grace, to talk about prevenient grace, that's almost one of the hardest ones to for kids to grasp. They're like, wait, so God was like preparing a way for me in some ways, or was going ahead to show me his. It's like, they're like, but how did he know where I was going to go? It always kind of leads to some of those questions and stuff like that. But it's always cool to kind of see them like, wow, God's really thought this through for me, because we always talk at the beginning about like when creation happens and stuff like that, how intelligent design, like when you can see how things in the earth work, even things like the water cycle, or you look inside yourself and see how your body works and functions and stuff like that. You just see so much intelligent design. And then when you get to the idea of grace, it's like, God's got this plan for you, and He knows what's happening in your future and stuff like that. And He's going ahead. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. A couple of things related to that, there's this songwriter named Billy Crockett. And he talks about, the grace that runs ahead of you and sneaks up behind you. And so I've always kind of, I've always kind of liked that image, because, where we find our place in different spots, that, your heart might be prepared, whether or not you've been walking with Christ or known Christ, that this love was there, and it's like, how could this be, or suddenly, and then Wesley, there's a famous poem, and I think Wesley referred to it, or maybe it came later, called "The Hounds of Heaven." It's this sort of love of God that's kind of tracking us and stalking us. In Psalm 23, which is really, very well known, there's this line: "Surely wisdom and love will follow me all the days of our life." And that word "follow," really the best translation from the Hebrew is sort of stalk. That's surely goodness. It's like, it's not like you think about something follow you, that there's this little puppy that's following you. It's back there, but no, this thing is the hounds of heaven sort of stalking you. So that love of God is there for the human response, and it does. There is human responsibility in that.
It's really amazing that, like, once you're made aware of like how God has moved, or where He's moving, or kind of being shown like a little, it's like you can see those breadcrumbs in your past of like, oh, He was there too, and He was there too. You know what I mean? Like, and maybe we didn't recognize it at the time, but you see kind of how God has walked with you and worked with you before you even knew. You know what I mean? I always tell the kids, it's kind of like when you go to like an amusement park, and for some reason somebody catches your eye. You just make note, and then you just see them all over the park. Like, there's thousands of people here. How am I seeing this one person?
That's a great illustration.
All over the place. Yeah. It's like, wow, because for some reason you were made aware of this, and now you can see it everywhere. Yeah,
it's like buying a car and you don't see your car, and then suddenly you see.
Yeah, everybody's driving your car. That happened when I got the minivan. I was like, oh yeah, I don't see any Honda minivans. And then I drive through here, there's like 15 in the parking lot from the preschool. I'm like,
sure. So when you get, see it, so, it's that sort of awakening that comes when of God's love. And so, that fits right nicely into the next all, which is, all can be assured that they are saved.
Yep.
All can be saved, all need to be saved, and all can be assured of their salvation. And so this was important to Wesley, I think, because of his own experience and not knowing that. I mean, he was earnestly trying to follow God in his studies, in his actions with, coming to America, but also things he was doing with the Holy Club. And so he knew how important it was. And so, he leaned into some Bible verses there, and that people can know that they are loved by God. And, and sometimes I think just based on people's past, and it's a really sad thing, I think, sometimes when I talk to people, they've really been kind of beat up figuratively in their lives, and sometimes by church, and so they don't feel like they're worthy. I've had experience with people who would not come down for Holy Communion because they didn't feel like they were worthy to receive Holy Communion. And I think that would break Wesley's heart, that people couldn't know of that assurance that God loves them, and to have that and to know that fully. So that was another point. And then the fourth one gets into the holiness or sanctification or whatever it is, and that all can be saved to the uttermost. And so it's something that you referred to a few weeks ago with the house illustration. Yeah, that salvation just accepting Christ's love of us and recognizing the sin of our life and becoming a Christian. Sometimes we might call that born again to use that. But Wesley saw that as just the front door. Right. That then you grew on, and if you think about your house, there's different rooms of your house that you might need Christ to come into and put order into. Yep. So you get up on the front porch and accept him in, and then once he comes into the house, the different parts of our lives that are there need to be set in order.
Good stuff. Yeah. That idea of just kind of true sanctification and reaching that spot by allowing God to have more and more control over things. It just brings to life, really, again, the process. And I know we keep saying this, but just understanding that your faith isn't a completed product. Your faith is something that you live and practice daily. And that's how we get closer to that sanctification.
Yeah. And so, he talked about our need to be perfected in love, and that, and he believed that you could reach that point of perfection in love. I think that is something that we as modern Christians struggle with. Yeah, don't you?
Yeah. I agree. But I always think about it. What's the pottery that you had that one Sunday? Oh, you were the cracked pottery. Yeah, I think about that because. There's a verse, and I don't remember the exact space, but it's where Paul basically talks about that, he's almost thankful for the places where he's broken because it gives God more room to shine through. And that's how I always kind of view that pottery, because it's like God fills in that gap where we feel that brokenness and all that stuff. So all those visual cracks, in my head, I kind of have this like just visualization of myself, like where I feel broken and empty or whatever. Like that there's just these cracks, know? Yeah. And then God comes through, and God shines through in our weakness more than in our strength sometimes.
Well, that's a verse right there. Yeah. That his power is perfected in our weaknesses. Right. And so, I think, the struggles that we have, and lots of times our struggles are with other people, people who don't think and look like us sometimes, and right now as we're sitting here with the world sort of in shambles with what's going on with Israel and already in Ukraine and stuff, you see people turning against people, and that can't please God. No. And we look within our own tribe as Methodist, and people turning against people, and just the things that other Christians say about other Christians. It is. I think that perfection and love is something we really deeply need to be. Going back to the house illustration, there's a little book. It's very small. It's called My Heart, Christ Home. And if you can get a copy of it, I think you can probably download it online now. It's just a very short, almost pamphlet. Yeah. But they talk about Christ coming into the different parts of the rooms, and he really milks that metaphor with coming into the living room, coming into the dining room, and the different parts. And then there's this one chapter towards the end where, he comes in and Jesus is sitting in front of this closet or something. and it's like the door is locked. It's like, yeah, Jesus, you don't need to go in there. And he says, yeah, I do. I need to go in there. And so I think we all have sort of those places in our lives, that keep us from being perfected in love. Is like, we don't want Jesus messing in that, because it's going to, it's going to upset some things, So, but Wesley really, that was really, and as we take vows as preachers, we have to, make a vow, that we believe we will can reach perfection in love.
Right.
And, I always stumble a little bit on that, because I think we all know we're sinners and we're falling straight, but I think there is, we talked about it, I think, in our last series, that there is this there's idealism, but there, which is, sometimes not realistic, but there is this ideal. And I don't think John Wesley meant, and I don't think the teaching of sanctification means that we're going to be perfect in every way,
right,
because we've all sinned, but we can reach perfection in love, where our first inclination is to love.
Yeah.
And, can't wait to get there.
It says like, isn't it like it's strive for greatness? You know what I mean? So it's like, it's always that thing you're trying to attain and you're working towards, but it might just be one of those like things about like, maybe perfection looks like dedicating your life, to being more and more perfect each day. Yeah. And maybe Christ is the one that fills that ultimately, eventually in heaven and stuff like that, that we do reach perfection, but it's maybe not on I don't know. It's kind of thinking along.
I do think the sort of excuse that you hear, like somebody blows up about something and they say, well, I'm only human, I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
I was mad. And that's not an excuse.
Right.
There's a greater ideal that we, as people of faith, need to be striving for. Sure. And so that does not make it right just because you say, I'm only human, I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we all are, but we need to be striving for something greater. So
for sure.
And so, we kind of took a turn then in the sermon. I wanted to get those four things because I thought they were important, and they do sort of relate to baptism. But just because we've had a lot of baptisms here recently, I thought it was important for us to understand or to think about sort of the Methodist understanding of what Methodist is, sure, because it also has to do with this grace and in both of the sacraments, in both Holy Communion and in baptism. We look at God as primarily moving towards us, in these means of grace. It is, it's something that God is present in the sacraments, whether we emotionally feel anything at all. Right. Sometimes we may take Holy Communion, it almost feels like we're going through just the motions, and other times it may feel very, very sacred and holy to us. Sure. But God's presence is there. It's just for us to be awakened to it, to go back to our earlier conversation. And so, looking at where baptism came from, of course, John the Baptist was baptizing people for the repentance of their sins. Yep. Then Jesus came along and, it becomes more of an identity thing. Jesus had no sins to be forgiven. Right. And so what are we baptized into? Well, it's a little bit of both those things, because it definitely is us repenting of our sins and accepting Christ's grace in our lives. But how can a little baby do that?
Sure.
And so then we have to look at what was sort of the historic understanding of that. And it goes back really into our Judaism, Jewish roots, because that's what Christianity came out of, and looking at Abraham. When Abraham stood under the stars and looked up and realized that there was one God, and heard God's voice, then he became under this covenant law. And the covenant was that male people would be circumcised. That was a sign of the covenant, just like baptism is an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. Right. And so Abraham is circumcised. Then all of his male heirs as babies, as little babies, are also circumcised as children of the covenant. Right. It wasn't something that they waited till they were 13 or 14 and say, okay, I'm going to make a decision.
It's time.
I think we'd have a lot less converts.
Yes, 100%.
And so, And so as you look into the New Testament, as the church was spreading and people were being baptized into the faith, the entire households, and there's many verses, I gave 4 or 5 examples. There's, there's many places where entire households are coming under this new covenant of grace. And so, but also adults were coming at different times. And so then they were baptized, but also, entire households were. And so I think, that we see that sort of reflected in baptism today where, we baptize children relying on God's grace. And, it is, and I heard someone say one time that all baptism is both infant baptism and adult baptism because, as an adult, it's sort of the entryway into the church. And so even as you're an adult, you're kind of a baby Christian or, that realization. But even as babies are baptized, there are adults that are taking responsibilities and making promises to keep God's I like that covenant. Yes. So it's not done in a vacuum. We do it in church. The church makes promises and vows, and so does the parents, and so does the family to raise the child in their own way. And so then at some point, I think, the road that we would track, although it doesn't happen this way all the time, but that, a child would be baptized and grow up in the church, be taught at home, and then they come to a time of accountability when they begin to be able to make adult decisions and be able to make decisions for themselves and claim this grace that was made on their behalf to claim it as their own. And that's what you're doing right now.
That's confirmation.
Yeah, that's what you're doing. You're teaching confirmation right now.
And that's literally the first thing I tell them is this is the process of you taking your faith into your own hands.
Right.
That's what confirmation is totally. And but I really do love the idea of the commitment the church and their families make on behalf during infant baptisms, because I think it's important for us to always be looking back to the younger generation and helping them grow up in the faith. I think it's deep intentional community when the community takes that seriously.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You think of tribes and stuff back in the day, or even like just older times where kids were wandering streets and stuff like that, growing up around family members and communities and stuff like that. A lot of people would be teaching and pouring into these kids.
Takes a village.
It really does take a village, and to have that here in a place where, in a church setting where you have people pouring into kids from all aspects, I do love that.
Yeah, and so my personal story is I was baptized as a baby.
Yep.
I don't remember it, of course. Don't remember it. I don't even remember the pastor. He moved away by the time I was able to realize things, but I do know his name is Charlie O'Brien, baptized me when I was a baby. But my parents then, they kept those promises. They had me in church, and so, then I went through confirmation, and that's when I, officially joined the church and all of that. And so, but I was still just a kid, 12 or 13 years old. And so there was other times in my life where I would have another deep experience of faith. And so I think lots of times people get sort of hung up. It's like, well, I really understand it now. Maybe I should be baptized again, And so what I think we have to lean into, I hope I'm saying this well, I grew up never knowing, at least in an appropriate way for my age level, about the love and grace of God.
Right.
I could articulate it differently at different stages in my life.
Yeah.
And each of those stages seemed very, very important.
Yeah.
And so I think for some people, they say, well, I didn't understand before, so maybe I need to be rebaptized. Well, I'm not going to get recircumcised.
Sure.
And so I think the important thing is to lean back in and remember your baptism and say, hey, God's grace is so incredible because God has kept his promises and stayed with me such that, I've known of his love, sometimes closer, sometimes, more distant, but God's love has been there with me throughout my life.
Right.
That makes sense?
It does.
Yeah.
It does. I was one of those that I was baptized kind of as a kid, but my family wasn't a huge church-going family. We were the definition of the Christmas Easter family. We showed up around those times, maybe 3 other Sundays a year. You know what I mean? But when I started coming, like always, like I got invited by friends, and then I was there every Sunday, and I've been in church every Sunday since. But I went up to Herzen, who used to be a preacher here many, many moons ago, and which is crazy to think how many moons ago at this point. But I said, hey, I would like to be baptized again, just as a commitment to make for myself. He's like, let's do remember your baptism. I can still do the water and stuff, but and he kind of explained a similar thing, is like, you don't have to get re-baptized to make your own point. You know what I mean? But so he kind of just used the he did the cross and water and stuff like that. It was just like, I just want you to remember, like you're making a commitment, and I was like, this.
Yeah.
Cool.
I don't think there's anything inherently evil or super wrong with being rebaptized, because I know a lot of people have been. Yeah. And so I don't want to come down hard on that. Yeah. I personally don't do it. I'm like Herzen. I try to help people lean into remembering their baptism. Yeah. I think we try to. I know we've had at least one remember your baptism services since I've been here, and we probably need to do it again. Sure. But I do think that's important. Every time we have a baptism, we should be remembering our baptism, because I think that's where, if we're talking about roots in this series, I think that's where we can really lean back into our roots. It's like, it shapes your theology when you realize it's this grace. Yeah. And baptism as a symbol and as an act, there is an adult response to it, and it's going to, there's going to be a response to it throughout our lives as we remember our baptism, remember who we are, remember whose we are, and that as baptized believers, we are on a particular path of love and grace and sanctification. And so I think by properly addressing it theologically, it can help us in our faith. Sure. Yeah. Sure. So,
and I love the visual just of roots. We're about to wrap up here, but I like the idea of roots and remembering it in that space, because I feel like sometimes I, get caught up, like my Christianity almost becomes too complex. And I need to be reminded, like, what's below the surface that has fed into me over the past, reminding myself of where kind of the Methodism came from and how that's impacted my journey up into this point, and going back to my confirmation days and going back to the early spaces where I learned, instead of trying to think about some of the bigger things that have just been clouding. Does it make sense? Like I think sometimes like this disaffiliation stuff, it feels like church, but it's just kind of clouding my brain, and I need to get back to like the roots of the faith, you know what I mean, that have fed into me at this point. Sure. So I don't know. It's just,
I get you.
I like the visual.
I get you. I do think that's important for us to remember. There's been conflict in churches forever. Yeah. I mean, read the New Testament. Sure. But just because there was conflict doesn't mean that we can't do better, and we can't confess the errors of our ways or the errors of our ancestors' ways. And so I think it is. I mean, there's a simplicity to it, but I'm not so idealistic to think there's not some complex things going on as well. But, I do think, I ended up with Wesley's talking about the world as my parish. Yeah. And looking at the sphere of influences that we have. And I'm not putting down other denominations or other churches or that who may believe on some of these nuances of things differently. Sure. The essentials we can have unity in, and non-essentials we can have liberty in. Yeah. And so, but I do think that we have a message that should connect with a lot of people. Yeah. Because it's a message of grace, a message of assurance, hope, and of hope and love. And I think that, the world needs that. Absolutely. And so however it's expressed, but particularly through our United Methodist Church, I do think we have a message that maybe we have forgotten or clouded or gotten distracted or, got off the way some way that we need to hold back to. Sure. And, I'm hoping that's part of what's going to come out of results of doing this service. Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to name it and claim it. Yeah, it's going to happen.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. And thank you for introducing Name It, Claim It, which is very poor theology.
I know.
but I get you. I mean, you got to name it before you claim it. Yeah,
sure.
We're somewhere out there.
We're just going to claim it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so to kind of wrap up, today is just, as we consider where we've come from, but also consider where we're moving to. You'll kind of give us a preview of next week in just a second, but just remember, that through these alls, through the way that we saw Wesley kind of start to begin, is that there's a space for us too, that we belong in this, and as we seek to get closer to perfection and stuff like that we can really walk with each other through this.
Yeah. And so looking ahead to this next week, we are going to be going back to George Whitefield, who was mentioned pretty heavily in the first couple of sermons. We're going to go back to him and his relationship with John Wesley and some of their differences, but just how they had this beautiful friendship that was there with two people that disagreed. I'm going to be leaning heavily into one of Wesley's sermons, which was called The Catholic Spirit.
Yeah.
Now, Catholic is the same way when we say the Apostles' Creed. It means the universal church, but the Catholics...
Capital C?
Yeah.
No.
I don't remember.
Okay.
But yeah, I think small c.
That's right.
Small c, the Catholic Church is a capital C.
Yes.
But yeah, and sometimes people get confused about that. But Catholic meaning universal, and so he preached a pretty important sermon on that, and had a lot of other things to say about that. So I think it's a good place to end up the series for now, and so it's probably a good place to end up the podcast for now.
There we go. Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. You know where to find us if you have any comments or questions about what we're talking about or anything like that. We encourage you to drop it in those comment sections. But other than that, Dave, anything else to add?
No. God bless. Come buy pumpkins.
Yes, come buy some pumpkins.
We got a few.
We'll catch you next time.
Okay, bye.